If I'm being honest, I don't understand why a loving God who claims to be all-powerful and all-loving doesn't do anything about children being born with cancer or many other things he could put a stop to.
Right, that's known as the Epicurean paradox.
Right.
The problem is, the question lacks any patience or will to understand the thousand-foot view of Scripture.
What do you mean?
Well, we know that according to the Bible, the fall of man is what initiated the curse on earth. Adam had union with God. He was given the choice to be content or to desire what was forbidden.
Right.
God warned Adam and Eve of death, and that is what they chose. The earth was cursed because of their disobedience. The relationship between man and God was severed.
Okay.
So remembering this as our backdrop now helps us look at these questions a little differently. So how can God be able to do something about evil and yet choose not to? Is he really all-loving in this case?
Right.
First of all, we now know the curse isn't his fault. Man freely made the decision to disobey despite warning. He is honoring man's choice by not intervening where he's not wanted.
Okay.
But God does intervene in accordance to people's free will.
What do you mean?
Well, Abraham, for example. God constantly reached toward people like him and wooed them, much like a man who woos a woman he loves. That way their free will is intact and he can usher in his goodness. And so God went into a covenant with his people. He was patient. He met people where they were and started guiding them from an evil, broken world to a new way that was slow progressed, but it was postured in a direction that was aimed toward the new covenant.
Where he'd come down himself as Jesus and pay the penalty to afford us back into a relationship with him.
Exactly. So back to the question, is God still loving despite not immediately and swiftly getting rid of evil?
Well, I can see how he is actively wooing people toward himself, like you said. It's as if the end goal of us being in relationship with him again forever is what he's prioritizing.
Right. I mean, think of this as a marriage. Humanity had union with God. They rejected him, constantly worshipped false idols, despite him doing extraordinary miracles and saving them from slavery, starvation, and even death.
They were basically the wife that sleeps around with other men.
Exactly. But despite all that, he came to earth and laid on the altar to be sacrificed himself so that we could be reconciled to him once and for all. Our punishment he put on himself.
So, the evil that exists today?
God sees it. It breaks his heart. He died for it. He's already done something about it. This broken world has an expiry date, and he's on the edge of his seat waiting to welcome his children into his kingdom.
It's just hard knowing people suffer while he could snap his fingers and change it.
Well, I'll tell you the truth. My son was born with cancer and a liver disease that ended with a liver transplant. My wife and I have cried all those tears and begged for all those miracles. We didn't get the miracle we wanted, but we do have our son. And you know what I'm absolutely grateful for?
What's that?
I'm grateful for the strength it's given both my wife and I. I'm grateful that others have heard our story and drawn strength for themselves. I'm thankful that when my boy cries, all those memories rush back because I hold him tighter and the love in my heart just swells up. God uses struggle to prepare people for his kingdom. From great pain comes great strength.
Makes sense.
I'm also thankful that God walked with us through it the entire time. I saw his hand every step of the way. Things as simple as someone paying for our meals, giving us accommodations. There were so many examples of how God used Christians, people who had given their free will away to be used by God, to surround and care for us.
So what can I tell people who are going through pain and suffering right now?
Well, first of all, that God sees you. He's willing to walk with you. He might remove that pain, he may not. The reasons may not make sense now or even in your lifetime. Think of the story of Job, how his life was completely destroyed, but he never got to see that millions of people would draw strength and courage from his story.
That is true.
And lastly, don't forget that God has already overcome evil. He has already appointed a day where there is no suffering or pain. There's no sickness, disease, or death. And he's inviting every single one of us to be a part of it.